Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is coming out real soon, so I'm here to make sure everyone's prepped for it. I'm Indian Jones, and this is the second book of Movie Book Club, and we're going to be covering 4 chapters, or 4 books, as they're actually called, of The Odyssey every week leading up to the release of the movie. Even if you didn't watch my coverage of the Iliad that I just finished up, hopefully this does good enough of a job getting you prepped. I didn't think my Percy Jackson knowledge would be enough to hold me over throughout this movie, even though the Sea of Monsters does take a lot of inspiration from The Odyssey. Okay, let's do a little pre-poem coverage and set the scene before we start with book 1. This poem takes place 10 years after the end of the fall of Troy, so a significant portion of time has passed since the Iliad. Check out my other videos if you want to know more about the Trojan War and how stupid the reasoning for that war was, and an intro on how meddlesome the gods could be. Anyways, we know we're covering the journey of Odysseus making it back home to his family in Ithaca after he's been away for about 20 years. 20 years is a long time, and I guess the opening is going to be Odysseus stuck on Calypso's island, and we're going to see what he's done before he got there and what he's going to do after to get back home to Ithaca. Meanwhile, back at home, his wife Penelope, who's played by Anne Hathaway in Nolan's movie, is constantly being swarmed by new potential suitors, mainly because people don't think Odysseus is coming back. It is cool to see that she's sought out not only because of her beauty, but because of her mind and her artistry, which is a welcome change from that of Helen of Troy. But yeah, their son Telemachus, played by Tom Holland in the movie, has to go through some shit to hold the suitors off. It's crazy because Odysseus left Telemachus when he was a newborn, so he doesn't even know his dad really. And in Emily Wilson's intro to the poem, she mentions he's 20 to 21, but is often characterized as younger than his age, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Apparently, he's always characterized as thoughtful, even though he's very immature. I think we're going to cut between different settings and times via flashbacks throughout the poem, which seems like it's right up Nolan's alley with his obsession with time, so I can't wait. And also, I learned that Odysseus is widely considered to be the first major unreliable narrator because he ends up being the sole survivor in a lot of the stories. Either way, I'm super excited to read through this poem. Here we go, book 1. The Odyssey starts 10 years after the end of the Trojan War, and all the Greek survivors have made it back home other than Odysseus. We don't actually get to see Odysseus in the first book, but we find out from the narrator that he's on Calypso's island, and apparently Calypso's fallen in love with him and won't let him leave, but mainly it's Poseidon who hates Odysseus and is keeping him there. During this time, his home in Ithaca is going through hell. There's a swarm of people who are basically squatting on his property, trying to court his wife Penelope and hope to take over his kingdom. There's no real resistance to the suitors because Odysseus' only son, Telemachus, was barely won, I think, when Odysseus left. So he's technically a man who should be able to take a stand, but he still seems boyish and immature and incapable of really doing anything. He's got to step up and do something though, because the suitors are eating all the food, drinking all the wine, and also trying to sleep with his mom. So yeah, I think they get the award for worst house guest ever. Although it doesn't help that Telemachus doesn't even know if Odysseus is his actual dad, and he only knows that because that's what Penelope told him. It's crazy, in this book he wished that someone else was his dad because at least that person would still be here while his supposed dad isn't. So not only did he not know his dad, he also doesn't have any hope that he's still alive.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Sir, please. Please, I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Meanwhile, on Olympus, while Poseidon is away, Athena convinces Zeus and the other gods that Odysseus has paid his dues and should be able to return home. And Zeus allows her to go speak with Telemachus while she pretends to be Mentes, one of Odysseus' old friends. She tries to plant the seed that Odysseus is still alive and that he'll soon return to Ithaca, and Athena also tells Telemachus to get all the suitors together in one spot and tell them off. Athena also instructs him to go to Pylos in Sparta to ask his dad's comrades Nestor and Menelaus about his dad. And this conversation actually gives confidence to Telemachus. He gets the balls to speak up to his mom when she's whining about a song, and he actually calls the meeting with all the suitors that are there, and even though some of them respond questionably, he still has the balls to call the meeting, which is something he wouldn't have done before. The funniest part about book 1 is how Zeus mentions that it's annoying that humans blame gods for meddling, saying that it's the humans' own fault. But come on, dude, we know how much the gods actually meddle. Like, look at Athena meddling throughout the course of this book. On to book 2. The assembly that Telemachus had called for actually gets together. All the men of Ithaca and the suitors that were after Penelope end up meeting. One of the Ithacan elders praises Telemachus for finally taking charge and calling an assembly, because it's the first time they assembled since Odysseus had left. People can see the confidence that Telemachus has now and how uncharacteristic it was from his typical wimpy nature. And Telemachus is surprisingly self-aware. He knows he wants to do something about the situation, but he knows he's not skilled enough to actually do anything about it because he's so weak. It's interesting though that one conversation with Athena, who was disguised as a stranger that knew Odysseus, gave Telemachus courage, but I'm sure other people of Ithaca and even his mom have encouraged him to grow up to no avail. Telemachus gives a stern speech complaining about the current state of affairs with all the suitors and how he's tired of them eating all the food, drinking everything, trying to court his mom every day. But Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson in the movie, responds blaming Penelope, saying she's the one playing coy. She flirts with all the suitors on a daily basis, but won't actually commit to any of them. And he specifically remembers a situation where she said she would decide who to marry when she finished weaving the burial shroud for Odysseus' dad. And they all agreed to it, but at night she would undo all the knitting she had done throughout the day. So it was a lost cause because she was never going to finish it. Antinous is obviously pissed and wants to throw her out and send her back to her dad so he can choose a new husband for her. But Telemachus actually has respect for her and says no and calls the gods for some support to punish the suitors. And Telemachus also lets the suitors know that he's heading out to Pylos and Sparta to find out any information he can about his dad. Later, Athena takes the guise of another one of Odysseus' friends, Mentor, and tells Telemachus that she's going to find him a crew and encourages him, saying that his journey will actually go well. As he continues to pack, Athena goes on, taking the form of Telemachus himself to get a loyal crew and boat for Telemachus' journey. Telemachus doesn't tell any of his servants that he's leaving because he's worried his mom will find out and stop him, but he does tell one of the nurses, Eurycleia, and she tries to tell him if he goes, he might meet the same fate as his dad. But he convinces her it's not going to be the same situation because he knows there's a god on his side. Telemachus obviously figured out that Mentes was a god of some sort, but it's still crazy that advice from a stranger who might be a god holds more weight than people who have been giving you advice your whole life. Okay, book 3, let's do it. Book 3 opens with Telemachus already at Pylos, ready to learn more about his dad. I'm glad we got right to the destination and didn't have to sit through the entire boat journey. Honestly, for me, this is one of those rare cases where the destination is more important than the journey. As soon as they arrive, they see a ritual sacrificing bulls in the name of Poseidon, which is fitting because he's the one keeping Odysseus on the island. Anyways, even though Telemachus doesn't have great experience with public speaking, he gets more encouragement from Mentor, who's actually Athena undercover, to approach Nestor and ask about Odysseus. Mentor is really being the mentor Telemachus needed. I actually don't know if mentor, the word, originated from this or the other way around. Okay, yeah, I just checked and it does come from this character in the Odyssey. I don't know how I thought it could be otherwise. And also, what is the actual mentor doing while Athena's out here pretending to be him? Anyways, Nestor ends up having no information at all about Odysseus and ends up going on a rant about the falling out between Agamemnon and Menelaus, the two Greek brothers who were at the forefront of the Trojan War. The argument led to Menelaus heading back to Greece immediately and Agamemnon wanting to stay in Troy for another day to do more sacrifices, so Nestor left with Menelaus while Odysseus stayed back with Agamemnon. This is classic Nestor, known for being wise and just monologuing, giving advice that's mostly related to the question you asked. He would make a great politician. I'm just surprised that Nestor is still alive, to be honest with you. I figured he would be dead because he was already referred to as old during the Iliad, and this is what, 10 years after that? And later, Telemachus finds out what happened to Agamemnon when he finally returned from Troy. Apparently, there was a coward who didn't want to go join the fight in Troy, so in Agamemnon's absence, he decided to seduce Agamemnon's wife, take over the kingdom. Yeah, tough. When Agamemnon finally got home, he got killed by his wife's new lover, and it was up to Agamemnon's son to take revenge. And his son ended up killing his stepfather and his mother to get back the kingdom. I guess this was Nestor's way of encouraging Telemachus and giving him fatherly advice, letting him know what he would have to be ready to do to protect his kingdom from the suitors. Nestor says he prays that Athena shows Telemachus the same favor that she showed Odysseus and that he's able to do something about the suitors. Also, it seems like Nestor respected Telemachus enough to send his own son with him to go to Sparta. Maybe it's because he genuinely believed in him, or maybe it's because he had a feeling that the gods, and specifically Athena, were helping him out. One interesting thing throughout the first 3 books, we constantly see Telemachus being referred to as godlike. So the glow up is real, I guess. Let's go to book 4. I actually really like the pace of this so far. I have no idea how far Sparta is from Pylos, but we're already at Sparta, so we missed all of that middle part of the journey. Sparta is the next stop on Telemachus' journey and finding out more about his dad and why he's not back home yet.
How come you don't want me, man?
Sparta is the home of Menelaus and Helen, and they're very hospitable and happily meet Nestor's son, Pisistratus, and Telemachus. They actually even recognize Telemachus as Odysseus' son, mainly because of his resemblance, so that must give Telemachus hope that he's actually Odysseus' son. As they all eat food, we hear stories about Odysseus and how cunning he was during the Trojan War, and Helen specifically tells a story about how he dressed as a beggar to infiltrate the city walls to meet Helen, who at the time was questionably kept on the Trojan side with Paris, although she says that she really wanted to get back to her clever clever and fine husband in Greece the whole time, and it was Aphrodite that forced her to sleep with Paris. Then we get Menelaus finally talking about the Trojan horse, and it's the thing that Troy is most famous for, at least for me, and we didn't get a single mention of it at all in the Iliad. So I'm finally glad to get a glimpse of it now. Apparently Odysseus was the one who had the idea for the Trojan horse, and he was the one keeping everyone quiet as Helen went around imitating the wives of Greek heroes that were in the horse. What is Helen doing trying to get those Greek heroes in trouble, especially if she supposedly wanted to go back to Greece? But maybe she's gonna blame that on Aphrodite too. And then Menelaus also mentions that he wishes that everyone could have made it home safely and alive, even if it meant that he would only have a third of the riches he currently had. It's crazy because the Greeks of that era valued trophies and glory so highly, and the fact that he's willing to cut down on those things just for his comrades, that's some real shit. Anyways, the next morning Menelaus mentions that on his way back from Troy he had to capture Proteus, the old man of the sea, and Proteus told him how to get back to Sparta. And he also ended up telling him what happened to Odysseus and that he was actually stuck on Calypso's island. This is the first sign of life Telemachus gets for his dad being alive, so he thinks he's got enough hope and is ready to go back home to Ithaca. Meanwhile, back at Ithaca, all the suitors find out that Telemachus has actually dipped on them, so they hatch a plan to trap and attack him on his way back from Sparta. Penelope hears through the grapevine that Telemachus has left, which is crazy. You call yourself his mother but don't even know where he is. How did you not realize he had left? But she's obviously upset that she might lose both Odysseus and Telemachus, so Athena sends her a dream saying that Telemachus will be fine, but when Penelope asks about Odysseus, the dream is silent. Crazy that we're through the first 4 books of the Odyssey with no visuals on Odysseus at all. How long are we going to be away from the title character? At least in the Iliad, even if it wasn't named after him, Achilles, who it's primarily about, was in the first book, even though he disappears for a good chunk in the middle. But it's really cool, we get to hear all the stories about Odysseus from multiple different point of views, except Telemachus, because obviously he didn't know him at all. He's just a kid looking for a dad that he's never known. Anyways, that's a wrap on the Odyssey, books 1 through 4. I will catch you guys next week for books 5 through 8.